All came in on a Tuesday. I was standing at my kitchen counter, still in my robe, pouring my second cup of coffee, when my phone lit up with my son's name. I let it ring twice before I picked up. Not because I was busy, I just needed a moment to decide what mood I was in. Mom. His voice had that careful quality I'd learned to recognize over the years. The one that meant he wanted something and hadn't figured out how to ask for it yet. Renata's turning 50 in March. We want to do something big. 50. I thought about that for a second. My daughter-in-law was turning 50, and apparently that warranted a phone call to me on a Tuesday morning. How big? I asked. Like really big. Cocktail hour, plated dinner, live music, maybe 120 guests. He paused. You know people, Mom. You've been doing this for 30 years. There it was. I've been an event coordinator since 1994. Started with small corporate luncheons, worked my way up to galas, fundraisers, charity auctions, private celebrations for families with old money and high expectations. I retired 3 years ago officially, but I still kept my vendor relationships. You don't let go of a good florist or reliable caterer after 3 decades. That's not how this business works. My son knew that. He'd grown up watching me work. Where are you thinking? I asked. The Aldridge House, out in Westfield. I knew the Aldridge House, a restored 1890s estate, converted event venue, beautiful grounds. Minimum spend was significant. The kind of place where you don't just show up with a head count and a check. You needed to know the right person. As it happened, I did. I can make some calls, I said. He exhaled, and I could hear the relief in it. You're the best, Mom. Seriously. We talked for another 20 minutes. I asked about the guest list, the vibe Renata was imagining, whether she wanted formal or something warmer. He said she wanted elegant, tasteful. Flowers everywhere. A string duo, not a full band. Good wine, not just whatever the venue had on their standard package. I was taking notes on the back of an envelope by the time we hung up. That afternoon, I called Felicity at the Aldrich House. She'd been the events director there for 12 years, and we'd worked together on at least a dozen functions over the course of my career. She got me the date, a Saturday in early March, and gave me access to their preferred vendor portal as a professional courtesy. I called Nora at Fiftieth Florals, who I'd used for weddings and retirement parties, going back to 2001. I called the catering contact I'd trusted with sensitive accounts for 20 years. I called the string duo that a colleague had recommended the previous spring. Over the next 3 weeks, I built the entire event from the ground up. Not as a hired coordinator, as a mother-in-law trying to give her son's wife a beautiful 50th birthday. I was doing this as a gift. I made that clear to myself, if not explicitly to anyone else. My son would call every few days with updates. Renata wanted champagne for the cocktail hour. Renata had changed her mind about the centerpieces. Taller now, more dramatic. Renata thought the room should be candlelit. I adjusted, rebooked, confirmed. At one point I drove out to Westfield myself to walk the room with Felicity and sketch out the table arrangement on a notepad. I never spoke to Renata directly, not once. I told myself that was fine. She was probably busy. Planning something like this from the outside could be overwhelming, and maybe she just trusted my son to handle the logistics. Maybe. The invitations went out in early February. My son had told me there would be around 120 guests, family, friends, people Renata had known for decades. I waited for mine to arrive. I assumed it was coming. I'd booked the venue. I'd called every vendor. I'd driven 40 minutes each way to look at a banquet room. I wasn't expecting a gold-leafed card with a red wax seal, but I assumed something was coming. It didn't. By the middle of February, I stopped checking the mailbox with that particular kind of hope. A week after that, I told myself I didn't need an invitation. I was family. Of course I was coming. I brought it up carefully one evening when my son called. I said something like, I was thinking I'd wear the navy dress, the one with the silver buttons. Do you know if there's a cocktail hour dress code? There was a pause on his end that lasted about 2 seconds too long. Mom, he said, about that. I sat down. He told me that Renata had decided to keep the dinner to a very specific group. Close friends, her side of the family, a few people from her work, that it was going to be intimate and she wanted it to feel like her space. He said she appreciated everything I'd done, everything I was still doing, but she felt like my presence might make it feel. He didn't finish that sentence. I finished my coffee. It had gone cold. I set the mug down on the end table next to my chair, and I looked out the window at the yard, and I didn't say anything for a long moment. I see, I said finally. Mom, I'm not upset, I said, which wasn't true, but it was easier than the alternative. I'll call Felicity tomorrow and make sure everything is still on track. You're sure you're okay? I told him I was fine. We hung up. I sat in that chair for a long time after. I am 63 years old. I have organized events for governors' wives and hospital foundations and families who trusted me with the most important days of their lives. I have dealt with vendors who didn't show, weather that didn't cooperate, florists who sent the wrong flowers an hour before a ceremony. I have never once lost my composure in a professional setting. But sitting in my living room that evening, I will tell you honestly, I came close. Not because of the party, not even because of Renata, who I had always known kept a careful distance from me. It was my son. He had called me when he needed help. He had accepted every favor, every call, every hour I'd spent building something beautiful for his wife's milestone birthday. And then when I asked, not demanded, just quietly asked, if there was a seat for me at the table, he told me, in so many careful words, that there was not. I thought about what my own mother used to say. She said some people see the hands that built things, and some people only see the thing that was built. She was talking about something else entirely, but I thought of her that night. I made a decision. Not out of anger exactly, out of clarity. The next morning, I called Felicity. I need to talk to you about the March 8th event, I said. I'm stepping back from my coordinating role, effective immediately. The booking was made under my professional account, and I'll be withdrawing that. Felicity was quiet for a moment. Does the family know? They will, I said. She handled it graciously, the way a good venue director handles every complicated situation. She confirmed the event would be held in administrative suspension pending a new point of contact. The deposit was non-refundable under their standard policy. The date would hold for 72 hours while the responsible party was notified. Then, I called Nora at Whitfield Florals. Nora and I had known each other since my second year in the business. She asked me right away if everything was all right. I told her there had been a change in family circumstances and I needed to release the floral order. She said she was sorry to hear it. She said to call her when things settled. I called the caterer. I called the string duo. Every vendor I had personally brought to this event, I called. Not to be cruel. Not to ruin anything deliberately. But because those relationships were mine, I had built them over 30 years. They had agreed to this event as a professional courtesy to me. If I was no longer part of this event, neither were they. By noon, I had made 5 calls. By 2 in the afternoon, my son was calling me. I let it ring. He called again. I sent it to voicemail. The third time, I picked up. Mom, what is happening? Felicity just called and said the venue is. What did you do? I stepped back, I said. I'm no longer coordinating. The venue is saying they can't hold the date without your account. That's correct. The booking was made through my professional network. I'm withdrawing my involvement. The florist canceled. The caterer. What is happening? I didn't cancel anything, I said, and that was technically true. I had simply released my connections. What they chose to do after that was their professional decision. I just notified my contacts that I would no longer be the point of contact for this event. There was a long silence. Mom. His voice was different now. Not careful anymore. Shocked, I think. Maybe a little frightened. The party is in 3 weeks. I know, I said. I know exactly when it is. I've had it in my planner since November. I heard him exhale. She didn't mean to hurt you. I'm sure she didn't, I said. And I don't mean to inconvenience anyone. But I think it's reasonable that if I'm building something, I should be part of it. He didn't have anything to say to that. We talked for another 20 minutes, and I let him talk. He told me Renata would be devastated. He told me some of the guests were flying in. He told me this was really important to her. I listened to all of it. I did not change my position. After we hung up, I made myself lunch, a turkey sandwich and some tomato soup from a can, which is what I eat when I need something simple and I don't want to think about it. I sat at the kitchen table and looked out at the backyard. The maple tree had dropped most of its leaves by then, and the yard looked bare and honest. I thought about how much work I'd put into that party, the hours on the phone, the drive out to Westfield, the conversation with Nora about pale cream, ranunculus, and eucalyptus garlands. I didn't feel triumphant exactly. I felt something quieter than that, something more like relief. My daughter-in-law called me that evening. She had never called me before, not once in 8 years of marriage to my son. Frances, she said. My name in her mouth sounded strange, unused, like something she'd had to look up. Hi, sweetheart, I said. I always called her that, even when she gave me nothing in return. She told me she understood I was upset. She told me the party was just meant to be her space, her people. She didn't want it to feel complicated. She said, and I'll give her credit for saying this much, that she should have been clearer earlier on, and that she was sorry for how it had come out. I appreciate you saying that, I said. Do you think you could call Felicity back? And the florist? I took a breath. I'll think about it, I said. Frances, there are 112 guests. I know, I said. I put that number in the catering proposal myself. She didn't have anything to say to that either. We talked for a few more minutes. She said something about making it up to me, about having dinner, just the three of us, after the party. I told her that sounded nice. I kept my voice warm because I meant what I said. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I was just done being invisible while also being indispensable. I did call Felicity the next day. I reinstated the booking under a modified arrangement. I explained that there was a new point of contact and that my professional involvement was limited going forward. Felicity understood. She'd been in this business as long as I had. I called Nora. Nora said the floral order could be reinstated, but the custom eucalyptus garlands I'd requested required a 2-week lead time, and that window had now closed. She could do something similar. It wouldn't be exactly what I had designed. I told her to do her best. The caterer came back. The string duo, as it turned out, had already accepted another booking for that Saturday and were unavailable. My son had to find a replacement musician on his own. He found a solo pianist, which was fine. It was different from what I had planned. It was fine. My son called me 3 days before the party. He said everything was back on track. He said he wanted me to know how much he appreciated what I'd done. I told him I was glad to help. Then he said, I know this wasn't easy, Mom. I know we handled it badly. I looked out the window. The maple tree was bare now, just the branches, clean and clear against a pale sky. I love you, I said. That doesn't change. I love you too, he said. But I want you to think about something, I said. I want you to think about what it would have meant if you had just asked me to come. He was quiet. Not as the coordinator. Not as the person who knows the florist. Just as your mother. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was different. Softer, I think. Maybe tired. I know, Mom. I know. The party happened on a Saturday in March. I know because I had that date written in my planner for 4 months. I didn't attend, of course. I stayed home. I made dinner for myself. Pasta with olive oil and a glass of the Chardonnay I'd been saving for something, and I sat at the table by the window. Outside, the last of the late winter light was going gold across the yard, and the maple tree was just beginning to show the very first suggestion of green. My phone buzzed once around 8:30. A text from my son. Everyone's asking about the flowers. Nora did a beautiful job. Thank you, Mom. I set the phone down and finished my wine. There are things I've learned in 63 years that I could not have told you at 30. I've learned that giving without condition is one of the finest things a person can do. I've learned that there's a difference between giving without condition and giving without dignity. I've learned that the people in your life will define you by what you accept from them, and that sometimes, quietly, without anger, without ultimatums, you have to show them what you will and won't accept. I did not plan what happened as a revenge. I want to be clear about that. I simply withdrew myself from something I had not been invited to join, and let the consequences of that be what they were. My daughter-in-law texted me 2 weeks after the party. She said the evening had been beautiful. She said she hoped we could have that dinner she'd mentioned. We did eventually. The three of us, in early April, at a restaurant downtown that my son had chosen. Renata was civil, thoughtful even. She asked about my years in event coordinating, and I could tell she was genuinely curious, maybe for the first time. Maybe the party had made her see me differently, as someone with a professional life, a history, relationships that existed entirely outside of her and my son. I told her some stories, not the dramatic ones, The ordinary ones, the small things that go wrong at every event. The vendor who drops a wedding cake on the floor of the van and reassembles it in the parking lot. The mother of the bride who locks herself in the bathroom. The power outage during a plated dinner for 200. The stories that are only funny in retrospect. She laughed at the right parts. It wasn't a performance. She actually laughed. I drove home that night feeling something I hadn't expected to feel when all of this started. Not vindicated exactly. Not forgiven exactly. Something less dramatic than either of those. Something like, beginning. I have a planner. It's a leather one, brown, with my initials stamped on the cover. I've used the same style for 20 years. When I got home that night, I opened it to the next month, April, and I turned through the pages. There were a few things penciled in. A dentist appointment, a luncheon with an old colleague, a note to call the nursery about the maple tree. I found a blank Saturday in the middle of the month. I picked up my pen and I wrote nothing in it. I just left it empty, open. There's something I've always believed about the calendar. It doesn't care what happened last month. It just keeps turning pages, and every blank square is a new thing not yet decided. I closed the planner and set it on the counter and turned off the kitchen light. Outside, the maple tree was full. I've thought about what happened a lot since that March, not obsessively. I'm past the age where I let things loop in my head without end, but thoughtfully. The way you think about something when you're trying to understand it, not just survive it. What I keep coming back to is this: the situation didn't happen to me. It grew, slowly and quietly, out of a pattern I had allowed for years, without naming it. Every time I gave without asking anything in return, every time I smoothed over a coldness from Renata with a phone call I didn't have to make, every time I told myself that being useful was the same as being valued, I was teaching the people around me exactly how to treat me. Not because they were malicious, but because I never once showed them where the line was. That's the hard part to admit. I was 63 years old and I had to learn it like someone half my age. There's something about building an event that I always loved. The way every piece depends on every other piece. The florist calls because the caterer needs to know the table dimensions. The venue confirms the timeline so the musicians know when to arrive. It's a system, and the system only works because everyone in it understands their role and their relationship to one another. When I built Renata's party, I forgot to apply that same logic to myself. I understood my role. I just forgot to establish my relationship. When I made those 5 calls, to Felicity, to Nora, to the caterer, to the string duo, to the linen supplier, I wasn't doing it to punish anyone. I want to be clear about that, the way I was clear about it with myself that morning. I was simply telling the truth about what my involvement actually meant. Those relationships were mine. I had spent 30 years building them through reliability and honesty and showing up when it was hard. Withdrawing them wasn't revenge, it was accuracy. And what followed? The panic, the calls, the sudden realization that the beautiful evening they had imagined could not exist without me, that wasn't something I engineered. That was just consequence. When you build on someone else's foundation and then decide that person doesn't deserve a seat at the table, the foundation doesn't disappear out of politeness. It simply is what it is. What I hope when I think about my son and Renata and that dinner in April with the 3 of us at the downtown restaurant, what I genuinely hope is that something shifted for them, not because they were forced to scramble for 3 weeks, but because they saw, maybe for the first time, that I was a full person, not just a mother, not just a resource, not just someone who knew the right people and was happy to help. A person with a professional life and a history and standards that exist whether or not anyone is paying attention to them. Dignity isn't something you demand. You can't negotiate for it or explain your way into it. You demonstrate it by the choices you make when it would be easier to go quiet. I went quiet for years. I don't think I'll make that mistake again. The maple tree in my backyard is full now. I look at it most mornings when I pour my coffee. It was bare when all of this happened, and now it isn't. Things grow back, the important ones anyway, if you take care of the roots.